Joe Biden and Donald Trump are preparing to go head-to-head in a high-stakes debate ahead of November's US presidential election. CNN is hosting the event at its Atlanta headquarters in Georgia. It's the first time a current and former president have debated, and the first time these two have been in the same room since they last debated in 2020. The Democratic candidate, Joe Biden, is 81 and Republican Donald Trump is 78. They're the oldest candidates to seek the presidency.
Anywhere between 70 and more than 100 million people will be watching the debate. That is more than any other single event, whether it's an individual campaign event or their conventions or the part of their conventions where they give their speech accepting the nomination. And it's the two of them together where you are actually seeing and comparing them, both stylistically and hearing a difference in how they view different issues.
With both campaigns essentially tied in the polls, there's plenty on the line. And the economy, along with the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, are likely to be discussed. After a week of preparing, Joe Biden is expected to focus on contentious issues such as abortion. He could also bring up Donald Trump's involvement in the January 6th Capitol attack and potentially the former president's hush money trial conviction.
I think it's risky for Biden to push too hard on the felony convictions. On the other hand, I don't think it can be avoided. And I think if he makes it part of a broader issue about Trump's fitness for office and some of the things that he's done, more of a character issue than specifically about that trial and that outcome. I think that's probably a better strategy for him.
The conviction of President Biden's son, Hunter, could also be raised. But Donald Trump is likely to keep the focus on the number of migrants entering the US from the Mexico border and push his narrative about Joe Biden's mental fitness to lead.
You always want to be on offense in the debate. Audiences judge who wins or loses debates, political debates, based on who is the most aggressive without being offensive.
In 2020, it was Donald Trump who was the incumbent and Joe Biden the challenger for the White House. They debated twice. The first encounter turned into a chaotic shouting match.
Vote now. Make sure you, in fact, let people know you're a senator. I'm not going to answer the question because the question is radical left. Will you shut up, man?
The debate will last for 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. The candidates will each have a podium and be given a pen, paper and bottle of water. Joe Biden will be on the lectern on the right and Donald Trump will have the last word after a coin toss. There'll be no audience, props are out and microphones will be muted when the other candidate is speaking. Each will have 2 minutes to answer questions and a minute for rebuttals and responses.
The absence of an in-studio audience and the willingness of CNN to suppress the mic of the person who's not speaking should increase the likelihood that the people who are at home watching will be able to at least hear and interpret in their own right the answers being offered by the candidates.
The first televised debate took place in 1960 between Democrat John F. Kennedy and Republican Richard Nixon. The next TV face-off wasn't until 1976 between Jimmy Carter and unelected incumbent Gerald Ford. They've been held every election cycle since as a way for the candidates to make an impression with voters. A record 84 million TV viewers tuned in to the first debate of the 2016 election. That was between Donald Trump and his Democratic challenger Hillary Clinton.
I have a feeling that by the end of this evening, I'm going to be blamed for everything that's ever happened.
Why not?
Why not? Yeah.
It's still more than 4 months out from polling day, making this debate the earliest in modern US history. It's one of 2 confirmed so far. The second will take place in September. Voters say they'll be watching for a number of reasons.
I just want to know what their policies are going to be with regard to the economy, with regard to the problems this country is facing.
I'm definitely planning on watching it and kind of hearing from both sides, how are they going to help the country and help the people and really kind of help make our decision easier for who to vote for.
Pretty much middle-class American needs some answers to what's going on and how we can change the direction of where we're going right now.
I'm going to be looking for which candidate, answers very confidently, who's bringing truth to the story, and I think there's a lot of light that needs to be shed against both candidates.
Well, joining me now is North America correspondent Jade Macmillan in Washington, D.C. and from Canberra, the ABC's political lead, David Speers. Good morning to you both. Great to have you along. Jade, I want to start with you. What are you going to be looking for from this debate that gets underway shortly?
Well, Dan, I think there's a few things that many of us will be looking out for. The first is how Joe Biden and Donald Trump conduct themselves on this debate stage in this very high-pressure moment, roughly 4 months out from election day. Neither candidate is considered popular in the American electorate, and both of them are going into this debate with significant challenges. Joe Biden will be hoping to come across as someone who is in control as the commander-in-chief. He would be well aware of the concerns that many Americans do have about his age and his fitness for office. They are concerns that Donald Trump has really tried to fuel. He might only be 3 years younger than Joe Biden, but polls suggest that voters have more concern when it comes to Joe Biden's mental capacity, fitness for office. Donald Trump, I think, will be hoping to project an image that is presidential, given everything that has taken place since he left the White House, the incredibly tumultuous circumstances in which he left, the legal troubles that he has faced since, and his historic conviction only recently in New York, becoming the first ever former US president to be found guilty of criminal charges. He will be trying to come across to American voters as someone who is deserving of being back in the White House. The second thing I think we'll be looking for is how they interact with each other. Will Donald Trump be as forceful when it comes to a one-on-one matchup with Joe Biden? When it comes to those concerns about his age, will he want to bring up the criminal conviction of Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden? On the flip side, how far will the president go when it comes to pointing to and highlighting Donald Trump's criminal record? His campaign in recent days has certainly done that, releasing ads that describe Donald Trump as a convicted criminal, but how far will he go on the debate stage? And the third area, of course, will be policy issues. A lot of the positions that Joe Biden and Donald Trump have on the biggest issues facing American voters are well known. They differ wildly on some of those areas, but is there anything revealing in how they discuss some of these really big concerns that do have an impact on how voters perceive them and ultimately how they make their decisions? Yeah,
you've covered quite a bit of ground there. David, from your perspective, what do you think, with so much at stake, will be the focus of the two presumptive party leaders?
I think the focus, the focus will be for the leaders, yes, on policy, but more, I think, in a format like this, showing who is more in control on the stage, who commands the stage, who is more convincing of their arguments. And bottom line, I think, for the audience, what's going to matter here is, does Joe Biden look too old, or does Donald Trump look too crazy? And that's kind of the challenge for both of them, right? Trump can't afford to feed into the argument that he's just too unpredictable and mad for the job. Biden has this age problem that Jade talks about. So this is the challenge for the two of them ahead of this very high stakes moment that we're about to witness. It'd be nice to think that this all focuses on polite policy differences and debate around migration, inflation, abortion, foreign policy. But I really do think this will come down to how aggressive the two of them get, how much calm Joe Biden can hold on to. He'll be helped, no doubt, by the muting of the mics, so different to what we saw 4 years ago, and you played a bit of that earlier. But I don't think that's going to restrain Donald Trump here. So how does Biden handle all of that? This is going to be the test. And there is a lot at stake for both of them. The race is very tight, as you pointed out earlier, Dan. And look, if one of them has a bad night, I probably suspect Trump could recover from that. Biden may not. If he has a shocker, I was talking to someone pretty well plugged in with Democrats making the point that it's still not too late to change him out for someone else. Now, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but this is happening, this debate, before the conventions. That's not normal. So there is still time, as wildly unlikely as that might be. But there is a lot at stake here. Neither can afford to stumble.
Yeah, that would be an extraordinary development if that were to happen. David, in terms of what you'll be looking for, with these new rules in place, the microphones will be muted. There's no audience, which, as John Barron was explaining earlier, is going to be a real challenge for Donald Trump, but actually might end up being better for him in the long run in terms of the way that he performs. But what, David, do you think that both of them need to achieve from this very early debate?
Well, it is early, and it's done without the Debates Commission organising this, which is also unusual. They have a system in the US where the Independent Debates Commission decides on when the debates are, where the debates are, but importantly, who the debates will include. Now, RFK is not involved. He's the third-party candidate here. And look, maybe that might work out well for him if people are looking at these two guys tonight and thinking, well, I don't much like either of them. But anyway, there were reasons why Biden and Trump wanted to keep it to just the head-to-head contest here. Trump basically agreed to Biden's rules here on the date, the timing of this, the muting of the mics thing as well, simply because he'd been goading Biden for so long to have a debate. He can't say no to any debate. So this is what we've got. Again, what they need to achieve is, for Biden, that fine balance, and I don't know what the right balance is, between calm reassurance that he's getting on with the job and isn't crazy, but also taking it up to Trump and telling people that he is a risk to democracy. How he strikes that balance between going for the jugular but looking presidential is really difficult. For Donald Trump, who knows what we're going to get? It's the unpredictability that's kind of his charm. So, does he go all out despite the muted mics and go after Biden on everything throughout? And then there's the moderators. I do genuinely feel for Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, who are about to host this thing. These are incredibly high pressure moments. And, they've got to approach this, as I'm sure they will, in the fine traditions of journalistic integrity. But do they spend time calling out mistruths and lies? Do they leave that to the candidates on stage to call each other out? Really difficult and a pressure moment for the moderators here too.
And I wonder if CNN is partly getting ahead of that by putting out some comms in the last couple of days saying, this might not necessarily be the best place to be fact-checking every single point, but they'll be more moderate navigating the traffic, if you will. Jade, I wonder what, if any, has been the reaction to these rules and this debate at such an earlier point, because so much of your reporting that I've been seeing in the recent weeks is that there appears, and correct me if I'm wrong, to be a real voter apathy there and a real question about integrity of politics that is not unique to the US, to be honest. It's gripping the world.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty broad assessment that there's a general lack of enthusiasm for what is a rematch of 2020. As I said, both Donald Trump and Joe Biden are considered broadly unpopular. I was speaking to voters outside the White House only today, people from a number of different states across the country. You'll often hear people saying things like, I wish these weren't our two candidates, that this is not the best that the United States has to offer, but we're going to have to make a decision between the two. Of course, in a country where voting is not compulsory, there is a third option, and that is to sit this out altogether. I mean, people could get behind a third-party candidate like RFK Jr., or they could decide not to vote. And that is going to have an enormous impact on the outcome of this election, voter turnout, who turns out. Joe Biden, we know, has been struggling when it comes to younger voters. Both potentially stand to lose support from people who decide to back a third-party candidate like RFK Jr. instead. So I would say not a lot of enthusiasm that you hear apart from, the very strong supporters for either candidate. There's a whole lot of people in the middle who aren't particularly excited either by this debate tonight or about the election more generally.
Yeah. David, you've got about a minute left before we get to the debate itself. RFK, just give me a sense of his role and why he is being seen at this point as quite important.
Well, I think, and look, Jade will probably have a better answer on this in the 30 seconds I'll leave, but I think it's because what she touched on, the unpopularity of the two candidates that are on offer. Look, there's a lot of wacky conspiracy stuff that he feeds as well. I think his support will be limited, but it'll come down to the unpopularity of Trump and Biden that boosts his stocks.
Yeah, Jade?
Yeah, I think David's right. I mean, when I was at the White House earlier today, there were a group of RFK supporters who were chanting, protesting the fact that he wasn't allowed to be part of this debate tonight. He didn't meet the criteria that the debate host, CNN, had set, so we won't see him on stage. Could he still qualify for the second one that is scheduled to take place in September? We'll have to see. But I think both sides, when it comes to Donald Trump and Joe Biden's campaign, are aware of the influence that he could end up having, not in terms of actually winning the presidential election, but because this race is expected to be so close and because it could come down to a relatively small number of voters in some of these key swing states, states that could go either way. If RFK Jr. does poll well in some of those areas, then it could have an impact.
I will have to jump in. Our international viewers on ABC will leave us now. But Jade, just taking us up towards this final bit, in terms of that policy point that you were making, the policy discussion earlier, what will most people be looking for leading into this next really busy part of this campaign?
Well, David's right in the sense that, for all of the focus that I think the moderators will put on policy areas, for a lot of viewers, for a lot of voters, their impression of this debate will really come down to personality and who they think performed better on the night. But both Donald Trump and Joe Biden will be looking to score points in areas that they feel like they have the upper hand. For Donald Trump, that is the economy and immigration. He has been very critical of the way that Joe Biden has handled the economy, handled cost of living. We've also seen the number of people crossing the US southern border surging under Joe Biden's presidency. Those numbers have come down, but that has become a very powerful issue for Donald Trump to campaign on. On the other side, I think Joe Biden will really be looking, as he has done on numerous occasions in the past, to argue that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. He's likely to bring up the January 6th attack when Donald Trump supporters stormed the US Capitol. We've heard him repeatedly argue that he is not fit to return to the White House because of the way, among other things, that he handled that. And the other issue for Joe Biden is reproductive rights. Given how powerful an issue that has become in the wake of the fall of Roe v. Wade, that is something that Democrats have really focused on across the country, and it's become something that Joe Biden especially has really looked to campaign on too.
Jade Macmillan and David Speers, great to have you both along. Thank you for your insights, and we're taking you to that debate now.